stuck here. The cops won't bother me. I wanted to talk to you guys about something that's very important to me as a motorcycle rider, and that is the ease of maintenance and reliability. Ever since I bought this Kimco bike, and this is supposed to be a top-of-the-line bike. Of course, I bought it as a non-running bike, but the idea that I had to do so much unnecessary work to do regular maintenance on this thing, it sways me from buying anything other than Japanese bikes. In the past, I've had German bikes, I had BMWs, I had Triumphs, and I don't know why they make it in such a way that it just makes so much more difficult to maintain. There are bikes from Japan that are also difficult to maintain. For example, I've had ST1100s and ST1300s, and a lot of it has to do with all the plastic. And I can understand having a bike like this Kimco Exciting that's a maxi scooter with a lot of plastic. But the thing that I cannot excuse is that you have to actually push back the engine just to remove the front of the top of the engine for the valves. And then once you do that, you have to they just made it so much more difficult. And this is one thing that I look for in bikes that I want to keep for a long time. I want to be able to maintain them extremely well, but I also want them to be easy to work on. This is something that a lot of journalists and reviewers they never talk about because it doesn't really mean much to them, because they are just taking it to a shop and paying whatever fees to maintain them. But I don't particularly like to work on my bikes. I prefer to just go out and ride them. I do a lot of videos to show you guys how to do it because it's important to understand how a bike works, and I know that bike shops are very expensive, and I also know that when people start riding motorcycles, they do it for various reasons, including, for at least for me, is the transportation aspect of it, the inexpensive transportation. So when you take it to a shop, that cheapness actually goes away. And working on your bikes is probably the way you keep the costs very low as opposed to taking it to a shop. But the Kimco, in theory, it makes a lot of sense. It's a maxi scooter that's comfortable. It's probably arguably more comfortable than a touring bike because of the way you sit on it. So it's got these really good benefits and something that I really wanted. But now that I've been working on this and I realize their engineering is not that good, I'll probably it's going to sway me from buying Kimcos in the future. Now I have the Tenere, but I am kind of considering the NC700X because in a way that bike was extremely great to work on. Valve adjustments on it, you didn't have to remove a tank, you didn't have to remove anything other than drop the radiator slightly to reach the valves. And they made it in such a way that everything about that bike was easy to work on. So in a way, if I keep a bike for a long time, that's probably one of the #1 things I look for, is the ease of maintenance. And a lot of times you'll see guys riding, specifically journalists, who ride the bike for a day. Yamaha gives them like a new 700 for a day and they ride it. And how can you possibly even get to know the bike that well to tell your viewers that it's going to need this later on, that the spokes go loose, the valve adjustments are difficult? This is why, like, when I'm looking at YouTube videos, I'm looking for owners that had bikes for like 50,000 miles, or at least they have worked on the bike a little bit. And that's one of the issues I see with a lot of YouTube reviewers and journalists. Journalists I do not trust at all because a lot of them, they're getting paid by the manufacturers. At least the YouTube guys, they're a little bit more honest with their reviews. They generally like the bikes, but the problem is a lot of people don't ride that much, and I think you have to look at people that actually own the bikes and are willing to complain about them. Another segment of the owners that buy bikes is that you often hear, you know, I put 5,000-10,000 miles on this bike and I love it. The thing is, when I put 10,000 miles on bikes, I just see a lot of negative things about bikes. So oftentimes I'm looking at owners that are honest enough with their bikes to give you the bad of bikes. And generally, owners that are really into the bikes, it's almost as if you're looking at your own child. You're not going to be looking at the bad parts of the child. You're only looking at the good. But for me, I like to know what I am dealing with, and that's why I'm willing to completely trash my bikes. So this Kimco, I thought it was a great platform, but I cannot recommend it at all. But it is my first Kimco, so maybe there's some other ones. As far as the 10-ray that I just bought, it seems to be relatively inexpensive to run. The only downside is that it's a gas hog. I mean, it really wastes a lot of gas, but it's understandable. With 1200 cc's, it's normal. It's a big bike, it's a heavy bike. With a shaft drive, it's really great. The only thing you have to watch out with the 10-ray, the 2012s and 2013s, I have a 2012. And a lot of people ask me, why did you get a 2012? It's the first one. Well, it's the only one I could afford, so it kind of just fell in my lap. But also you have to watch out for the cam chain tensioner, or there's something happening with the cam chain tensioner on the early 10-rays. And there's been a couple people with some big engine failures due to that. But most of the issues that you're going to run into the 10-ray with the cam chain is that it's just a noisy cam chain. Yamaha actually makes a lot of things that are noisy. Even the R1s that I've had, they were noisy because of the cam chain. If you're willing to live with the noise of the engine, then a 2012 10-ray is probably going to be just as good as any other. Of course, newer ones have much better electronics, but I often find that the electronics doesn't compensate for the amount of money that you would pay for getting an older version. For me, getting this older version in 2012, that's actually really modern for me, and usually I would get something much older. But I never see the point of paying $3,000-$4,000 more for a newer bike if I can use the old bike and do exactly the same as the new bike. This is the same reasoning. I look at a BMW GS, for example. If you look at a BMW GS from 2012 and then you look at a Yamaha 10-ray from 2012, you look at the pros and the cons and you look at the price. And let's say the 10-ray costs $5,000, the GS costs $9,000. Are you really getting that much more of bike than the 10-ray? And the answer is usually no. And I think a lot of people like to fool themselves into thinking they're getting a much better engineered bike. But just like this Kimco, a lot of engineering is over-engineering. And I think that's what I like about the Japanese, is making things simple. There's a saying in art, keep things simple, stupid. And that is what motorcycle manufacturers should be doing, keeping things simple. And I appreciate when I have a bike that's extremely simple to use and it just runs. You don't have to do any special thing to it. And hopefully it's this 10-ray, but also I do like the ability of not having to wrench on bikes all the time. I do it mostly to kind of help you guys, but this experience with this Kimco makes me appreciate Japanese a whole lot more.
Go to the store. Yeah. Okay, just get the bare essentials. This will last of our dough.
Hey, what do I look like?
Take a walk to the edge of town and go